From the moment my little niece entered our home, the behavior of my German shepherds noticeably changed. They didn't leave her side for a second. Their ears were alert, and sometimes they would quietly growl toward empty spaces. At first, I laughed at their reaction, thinking they were just being overly protective. However, my laughter quickly turned to concern when I noticed my niece anxiously glancing toward the windows. Last night, my worries grew stronger. The dog suddenly barked and immediately rushed to the front door. I ran to see what was happening and, with a heavy heart, looked outside. Inside, my niece was calmly sitting on the floor, playing with the colorful threads of the carpet. Rex and Stella, my loyal dogs, sat beside her, not taking their eyes off her. They didn't even respond when I called them, which was unusual for them. Their alertness made it clear that they sensed something I couldn't see. When she was playing, it seemed to me that something was wrong. Her face was pale, and there was a strange silence about her. This morning, when I asked how she was feeling, expecting her usual energetic response, she only nodded weakly and barely smiled, returning to her toys. My concern grew inside me. She didn't look like herself. She answered my questions briefly, and her gaze occasionally drifted to the windows, as if she was expecting someone unwelcome. Every time after these glances, she would withdraw into herself again, while the dogs stayed close, quietly snorting and ready to act. Should I discuss her strange behavior with my sister? But as soon as I reached for the phone, Rex and Stella sharply turned their attention to the front door, as if sensing someone's presence. I watched them closely, trying to understand what had alarmed them. The atmosphere in the house instantly became tense. They stood by the door, growling low, not taking their eyes off it. It was something new, and my anxiety grew. I looked at my niece. She continued playing with her dolls, oblivious to the tension around her. I wanted to believe she was simply enjoying her childhood and didn't feel the oppressive atmosphere. Meanwhile, Rex and Stella remained like statues by the door, ready for any development. The next morning, as sunlight filtered through the curtains, there was a knock at the door. I opened it and saw our neighbor, Mrs. Collins, on the doorstep. Her face showed concern. "Good morning," I said, trying to understand the reason for her worry. She rarely came by so early, and her presence clearly indicated something important. "Is everything all right with your niece?" she asked, her voice filled with obvious concern. I froze, unsure how to respond. "Honestly, I'm not sure myself," I admitted. If even Mrs. Collins had noticed something, the situation was more serious than I thought. Was I missing something important? Mrs. Collins told me she had seen unfamiliar children loitering near our house. This information made me wonder. Was their appearance connected to the strange behavior of both the dogs and my niece? As she continued talking, new troubling thoughts flashed through my mind about what these strangers might be planning. I needed to figure out what was going on urgently. I thanked Mrs. Collins for her attentiveness and care, then gently closed the door. When I turned around, I saw Rex and Stella still standing by the entrance, tense and alert. Even the closed door didn't fully calm them. They continued to stare at it intently, as if expecting something I couldn't understand. To ease the tense atmosphere, I decided to add some joy to the day. "Let's go get some ice cream," I cheerfully suggested to my niece, smiling to cheer her up. She nodded quietly, her mood lifting slightly at the thought of a sweet treat. I saw this as an opportunity not only to lift her spirits but also to carefully find out what was troubling her. As we walked to the ice cream parlor, I noticed a slight spark in her eyes. But beneath her brief smiles, there was still unease. I tried to engage her in conversation, asking about her day, hoping she would share her worries. However, her answers remained short and cautious, as if she wasn't ready to tell the truth. After buying ice cream, we went to the park. There, she immediately ran to the slides, playing happily. I sat on a bench, watching her but also keeping an eye on our surroundings. Beside me, Rex and Stella sat like faithful guardians, observing everything. Everything seemed calm, but after the morning's events, my senses were heightened. I became more attentive, trying to catch any signs of danger. Soon, I noticed the dogs sniffing the air uneasily. Their movements became sharp, and they focused their attention on a group of teenagers on bicycles. My niece noticed their stares. Rex and Stella's tails twitched nervously, but not out of joy. It was alertness. I tensed, trying to understand if these kids posed a threat. My heart sank when I saw my niece stop. Her body stiffened. The teenagers also slowed down, their gazes cold and hostile. Even from a distance, I could feel their aggression. She glanced at me briefly, then quickly hid behind the swings, avoiding their stares. The teenagers didn't approach, but their behavior was odd. They seemed to enjoy frightening her. This was wrong. Rex and Stella were already on their feet, ready to intervene. I realized I couldn't just sit and watch. I stood up from the bench and slowly approached my niece, trying to appear calm. "Hey," I said softly, trying to reassure her. "Let's go home." She nodded quickly, relief washing over her face. As we left the park, Rex and Stella surrounded us, moving closely as if protecting her. I felt a bit calmer, but questions still swirled in my mind. Who were these kids? Was their encounter a coincidence? On the way home, my niece gradually relaxed. With each step that took us farther from the park, her shoulders dropped. She reached out to pet Rex and Stella. The dogs walked ahead briskly, as if sensing something, as if they knew they had to guard her. When we got home, my curiosity got the better of me. We sat in the kitchen drinking juice, and I decided to carefully broach the topic. Who were those kids in the park? I asked calmly, trying to create a comfortable atmosphere for conversation. She fell silent for a moment, and I realized I needed to be patient, watching her reaction closely. When I tried to probe further, she visibly tensed, lowering her eyes to the floor. Her silence spoke louder than words. I felt she was hiding something she wasn't ready to talk about. My desire to protect her grew stronger. I couldn't rush her, but I wanted her to know she could trust me. Finally, almost in a whisper, she said, avoiding eye contact, "Sometimes they say mean things to me." Her confession tightened my chest. It hurt to realize that other children could be so cruel. Judging by her demeanor, those words wounded her more deeply than she was willing to admit. This small step toward openness shed some light on the situation, but I felt she still hadn't told the whole truth. I leaned closer and said gently, "You know you're safe here, right? Rex and Stella won't let anyone hurt you." She smiled faintly, but at that moment the doorbell rang. The sound interrupted our conversation, making her flinch. Rex and Stella immediately tensed. Their ears perked up, and they rushed to the entrance. I cautiously approached the door, following Rex, who was growling, and Stella, ready to pounce. Their behavior put me on edge. As my niece's confidence grew, we all celebrated her progress, admiring her resilience. Our family remained strong, tempered by the trials we had faced together. Her determination inspired us, igniting a fire of perseverance in our hearts. With each passing day, our bonds grew stronger, reminding us of the power of family and courage. We had faced tough times and emerged stronger, united as one. The love and care surrounding my niece gave her hope and peace. This journey brought us even closer, deepening our love and trust in one another. Now, happiness and harmony overshadowed past anxieties, leaving us more united and ready for any challenges ahead. We began discussing the situation, and when I shared what had been happening, the parents were shocked. Their reaction mirrored my own when I first realized the extent of the problem. They needed time to process what they'd heard, but I hoped they would understand how important it was to fix the situation, not just for my niece, but for their own children as well. The children who had been bullying her were also present. At first, they were tense and reluctant to talk, but gradually they became more thoughtful. Under the gaze of the adults, it seemed they hadn't even realized the harm they were causing. It was crucial to approach the situation carefully, not to blame but to help them understand the consequences of their actions. This conversation was the first step toward what I hoped would lead to positive change. Everyone agreed that we needed to find ways to improve my niece's situation. The meeting gave us hope. She seemed to feel better knowing that adults were taking action. This immediately lifted her spirits. We all wanted change and were ready to do whatever it took. It was encouraging to see the plan starting to work. Over time, the tension eased. My niece gradually returned to her old self. Warmth reappeared in her eyes. She became calmer, and even Rex and Stella sensed the change. They still kept a close eye on her, but their anxiety lessened. It was heartwarming to see the conversation having a positive effect. It was inspiring to watch the older children change their behavior. They became kinder, more attentive, and more respectful. The neighborhood felt peaceful again, as if we had turned a page and started a new, brighter chapter. We were becoming a community where people cared for one another, where everyone felt safe and accepted. Open dialogue helped us grow closer. Everyone understood how important it was to bravely address problems. This experience showed that honest communication could change a lot. Thanks to our joint efforts, positive changes occurred. It was heartening to see the children playing together again, smiling and laughing. We realized that our step toward open dialogue had truly helped. Rex and Stella gradually felt the calm returning to the house. Their tense expressions softened, and they began to relax around my niece. Their constant vigilance eased, as they now felt she was safe. Seeing them calm was touching, as it proved once again how deep their bond with her was. The past few weeks had been full of anxiety and tension. We all had to endure difficult moments, but now my niece's smile grew wider each day. We watched with relief as she laughed again. Her laughter, which had been absent for so long, once again filled the house. The whole neighborhood seemed to come alive, and everyone rejoiced in the return of simple joys. We began to appreciate the quiet, happy moments. Mrs. Collins stopped by with good news. "I've noticed the children have changed a lot," she said with a smile. Her words confirmed that our efforts hadn't been in vain. We were grateful for her support and her role in strengthening neighborly ties. Our community was growing stronger. Relationships were built on kindness and respect. It was heartwarming to see everyone working together for a peaceful life. Though the situation had improved, I remained vigilant. Watching the children play outside helped me feel calmer. I spent more time by the window, keeping an eye on them. It was important to me that everyone felt comfortable and safe. As life gradually returned to normal, I continued working to create the best possible environment for my niece. She began to talk about her days with more enthusiasm. Joy filled her voice, and each story was rich with vivid details. "Can I invite friends over to play?" she asked eagerly. We encouraged her to spend time with her friends, as it helped her feel more confident and secure. Watching her interact and laugh with her peers was truly heartwarming. Rex and Stella also returned to their usual routines, chasing balls, resting, but never ceasing to watch over her. Their protective instincts were always on alert. Their playfulness filled the house with joy, and each day we grew more appreciative of their loyalty and love. It was touching to see their bond with my niece strengthen. One day she said, "I'm so glad they're with me." Her words were filled with genuine gratitude, and we understood how important these faithful friends were to her. We were all amazed by how naturally and instinctively Rex and Stella protected her. Their simple displays of love and devotion made her life safer and happier. Their constant presence gave her a sense of comfort that couldn't be replaced. I realized that pets aren't just animals. They were her protectors, her friends, her support. They expressed their love in unique ways, proving how strong their bond was. These gentle giants had won our hearts with their care, showing how loyal friends can change lives for the better. Every day, we thanked fate for our close-knit family and the love that united us. In the evenings, we gathered for dinner, shared stories, laughed, and reminisced about happy moments. Each of us talked about the good things that had happened during the day. This way, we learned to appreciate what we had and find joy in the simple things. Over time, thanks to our support, my niece finally found the courage to tell us about her experiences. Her voice trembled as she admitted she had been bullied by older kids in the neighborhood. Her confession helped us understand why she had changed so much recently. It was incredibly brave of her. Before this, she had stayed silent, afraid that speaking up would only make things worse. She had hoped the problem would go away on its own. But in those moments when she felt particularly vulnerable, Rex and Stella were always by her side. It seemed they could sense her fear and never left her alone. These dogs had an amazing ability to detect threats that others couldn't see. Their intuition always protected her. Their presence gave her confidence. As a family, we decided to surround her with kindness and support, allowing her to heal at her own pace. The growing attention from our neighbors warmed our hearts, reminding us how important these connections were. Every smile, every kind word played a role in her recovery. Over time, she began to believe in herself again, feeling the warmth and care of those around her. My niece started making new friends, gradually moving away from her previous isolation. Each day brought new opportunities to spend time with her peers, and she enjoyed these moments more and more. Rex and Stella continued to watch over her, always staying close. Their constant presence gave us all a sense of calm. As she regained her confidence, we focused on rebuilding trust, reaffirming our commitment to support one another in any circumstances. We realized that together we could overcome any challenge. Through our joint efforts, we created an atmosphere where fears gradually faded. With each step forward, peace and harmony returned to our home, and our sense of unity grew stronger. Rex and Stella were more than just friends. Their loyalty became our anchor during this trial. They always remained alert, caring for my niece's safety. Their protective instincts reflected the unbreakable bonds within our family, reminding us of the importance of sticking together. We were endlessly grateful for their faithfulness and support during this difficult time. Slowly, with slight apprehension, I opened the door, expecting to see someone familiar. Fortunately, it was just a courier with a package. I thanked him and closed the door, breathing a sigh of relief. Rex and Stella relaxed a little but continued to watch the entrance warily. This small incident reminded me that the tension in the house hadn't subsided. Holding the package, I felt that something needed to change, and soon, for the sake of everyone's peace of mind. In the following days, I noticed that any sudden noise made Rex and Stella alert again, and my niece increasingly found comfort in their presence. It seemed the dogs had become her true protectors. I was both happy and worried about how strong this bond had become. I realized I needed to delve deeper into her fears to help her cope. My niece seemed calmer around Rex and Stella, but her anxiety hadn't completely disappeared. I decided to discuss this with my sister. Watching the dogs gently nuzzle my niece, I firmly resolved to call her that evening and try to figure out the situation. During our conversation, my sister noted that the dogs' vigilance had only recently appeared. We discussed possible reasons for their behavior. Perhaps something in our neighborhood was bothering them. The thought that Rex and Stella could sense things we couldn't was unsettling. But at the same time, their protection clearly gave my niece a sense of security. Later, closer to evening, my niece began to open up a little more. "They keep calling me names," she admitted. Her voice was quiet, but every word carried weight. Facing ridicule is a heavy burden for such a young child. It pained me to hear about her struggles. The cruel words from her peers had left a deep mark on her heart. Her sincerity was evident, and I realized I could no longer delay addressing this issue. I had to act. The hurt she felt from those harsh words couldn't be ignored. It was clear we needed to do something to restore her sense of safety. I made a firm decision to intervene. My sister fully supported me, and we decided to talk to the parents of the other children. This seemed like an important step after everything my niece had been through. Meanwhile, we focused on making her feel comfortable at home. That evening, we watched her favorite movie, hoping laughter would help her relax. For a moment, she seemed better, but it was clear this wasn't enough. We decided to organize a meeting with the other children in a calm setting. I hoped that by observing their interactions, we could better understand what was happening. At first, my niece didn't want to participate, as she had recently gone through unpleasant experiences. But over time, she agreed, knowing Rex and Stella would be by her side. I promised her I would keep an eye on the situation and that she could count on me. When the children arrived, their gazes mixed curiosity and alienation. Rex and Stella, like faithful guards, stayed close to my niece, creating an invisible protective barrier around her. Their loyalty gave her confidence, Laughter and chatter filled the yard. Everything looked like normal childhood fun. I carefully observed her interactions with the other kids. Though she was reserved, she managed to exchange a few words. However, the children kept glancing at my niece, whispering and snickering. At these moments, her expression changed. She seemed to withdraw into herself again. Her recent ease disappeared, and I felt my anxiety grow. Each time this happened, my sister and I exchanged worried glances. It was clear we couldn't just stand by and watch. We had to do something, but we weren't sure how best to proceed. A sense of urgency hung in the air. Despite our efforts to maintain the appearance of a joyful evening, panic gripped me when I suddenly lost sight of my niece. I looked around, hoping she had just joined another group. But when she was nowhere to be found, anxiety overwhelmed me, forcing me to act immediately. A loud, persistent bark from Rex and Stella guided me. Came from the yard. There I found her. She was sitting alone, hugging her knees. Relief mixed with worry as I approached. I needed to understand why she had left. The dogs circled her, gently nudging her, as if trying to comfort and protect her. I approached slowly, wanting to give her a sense of safety. Her cheeks were red, and tears glistened in her eyes. It was clear she was deeply upset. Nearby, a group of children stood, watching her intently. Their stares only heightened the tension. It was obvious she was going through a difficult moment, and I knew I had to act. Rex and Stella didn't leave her side. I knelt beside her and spoke softly, trying to calm her. My main goal was to restore her sense of security. I suggested we go back inside, trying to hide my own unease. She stood up, quickly wiped her face, and walked toward me, with the dogs following closely, glancing at her anxiously. It was clear something was deeply troubling her. I decided to get to the bottom of it and help her. I led her inside. In the house, Rex and Stella immediately pressed against her, nuzzling her as if comforting her in their own way. At that moment, Mrs. Collins, our neighbor, came in. Her face showed she was also concerned. "Is everything all right?" she asked. I hesitated, unsure how to respond, but her presence gave me confidence. As we talked about the children in the neighborhood, Mrs. Collins admitted she had also noticed their strange behavior. Her words only strengthened my resolve to address the situation. It became clear to me. My niece needed to feel safe and happy, and I was ready to do whatever it took. But with each passing day, her anxiety only grew. Despite the support of Rex and Stella, the usually cheerful girl now seemed tense and sad. I realized that the dog's care alone wasn't enough. I needed to find the root of her worries. Rex and Stella never left her side, comforting her, licking her hands, and resting their heads on her lap when she cried. Though their care was important to her, I saw that she needed more serious help. Couldn't just wait. I decided to act. I organized a meeting with the families of the neighborhood children and invited them to our living room, choosing a calm setting for the discussion. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I hoped it would help us understand each other. My niece sat nearby, nervous but hopeful.